I stood at the altar, my hands clenched into fists at my sides, my heart hammering so violently in my chest that I was sure the microphone would pick up the sound. The grand cathedral was filled with over 200 guests, all dressed in their finest attire, their faces expectant, their eyes glued to Celeste and me. This was it, the day I had spent months preparing for, the day I had poured my heart, my soul, and my bank account into making perfect. The towering floral arrangements lining the aisle, the imported roses, the shimmering golden arch framing the altar, it was all meticulously planned down to the last detail. The wedding venue alone had set me back nearly $8,000, but I hadn't cared. Celeste had wanted the best, and I had given it to her. Every penny, every ounce of effort, every waking moment had gone into ensuring that she would have the wedding of her dreams. And now, standing before the priest, staring at the woman I had believed would be my wife, I was about to hear the words that would shatter my world. I can't do this. The moment the words left her lips, the entire room plunged into a stunned silence. A sharp gasp rippled through the crowd. My breath hitched, my vision blurring for a fraction of a second as if my mind couldn't immediately comprehend what was happening. I blinked, my throat tightening. What? Celeste took a step back. Her face wasn't filled with nerves or regret. There were no tears brimming in her eyes, no trembling lips. She looked composed, almost smug. I can't do this, she repeated, louder this time, making sure everyone in the room heard her. I felt the weight of every single guest's gaze shift from her to me. Murmurs broke out, the kind of low, urgent whispers you hear at funerals when people try to make sense of something horrific. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. Celeste, what are you talking about? She didn't turn to me. She turned to the audience. She lifted her chin, her voice carrying effortlessly across the cathedral. My new husband will take your place now. Why don't you join the audience? The words hit me like a physical blow. My stomach twisted. My ears rang. I could feel the blood draining from my face. And then, from the crowd, a figure moved. A man stepped forward. Brandon, my so-called best friend. The one who had stood beside me during the wedding planning, offering advice, giving toasts at the bachelor party, standing as my best man. Brandon walked with an arrogance that sent a sickening chill down my spine. He didn't look guilty. He didn't even look ashamed. He smirked. He walked right up to Celeste's side and took her hand in his. I stood frozen, my hands curled into tight fists. My chest ached, the betrayal sinking its claws into me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Was this a joke? A twisted prank? But no one was laughing. Except Celeste's parents. The sound of their laughter cut through the air like a blade. My gaze snapped to them, expecting confusion, outrage, something. But no. Her mother and father, dressed in their pristine, expensive outfits, were laughing. Not awkwardly, not nervously, but gleefully, like they had known, like they had expected this. My pulse pounded. My breath grew shallow. The whispers in the crowd grew louder. Is this real? Is she serious? Oh my God, this is humiliating. Poor guy. My world was caving in around me, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The weight of the betrayal pressed against my ribs, squeezing the air from my lungs. Celeste turned to face me fully now, and the look on her face was pitying. You're a great guy, she said, like she was consoling me. But I realized I want something different. Someone different. I felt a sharp sting in my chest, like a knife being slowly twisted. Brandon chuckled, his voice smug. Hey man, don't take it personally. Some things just aren't meant to be. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to grab him by the collar, throw him across the cathedral floor, and wipe that grin off his face. But I didn't, because I realized something. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just a woman changing her mind at the last second. This was planned. Celeste's composure. Brandon's arrogance. Her parents' laughter. They had known. They had all known. And I had been the fool funding my own humiliation. I felt my fingers dig into my palm, nails pressing into my skin. The anger was there, white-hot, threatening to boil over. But I pushed it down, because reacting, breaking down, losing control, would be exactly what they wanted. They wanted me to beg, to demand an answer, to cause a scene. I inhaled deeply, my heartbeat slowing. And then, I did the one thing none of them expected. I smiled. Not the kind of broken, pitiful smile of a man trying to hold it together. No, I smiled genuinely, coolly, like I was completely unfazed. And I saw it. For the first time, Celeste's smirk faltered. Brandon's confidence wavered just a fraction. The guests stopped whispering. The laughter of her parents died. And in that moment, I took control. I nodded, my voice eerily calm. By all means, the stage is yours. Brandon blinked. What? I turned on my heel and walked down the steps. My shoes echoed against the polished floor as I moved past the stunned guests, past the photographers, past the stunned priest, until I reached an empty chair in the very front row. And then I sat down, crossed one leg over the other, folded my arms, and watched, like I was watching a circus act. Celeste's expression hardened. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the reaction they had anticipated. They had expected rage, desperation, collapse. But instead, I was watching them like they were the joke. The guests didn't know what to do. The murmurs swelled. Some even laughed nervously. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes locking onto Celeste's. You wanted a show? I thought. Then go on, Celeste. Give me a show. And in that moment, I realized something else. This wasn't the end for me. This was just the beginning. The laughter echoed through the grand hall like a cruel symphony. It wasn't just one or two snickers. It was a chorus. It mixed with the murmurs, the hushed gasps, the awkward shuffling of feet. Some guests had the decency to look appalled, shifting uncomfortably in their seats, while others exchanged amused glances, as if they had just witnessed the punchline of a well-executed joke. A joke. That's what I was to them. A fool who had thrown away thousands of dollars, months of planning, and every ounce of love and effort into a wedding that was never going to happen. And the worst part? The people I trusted most, the woman I had loved, the man I had called a best friend, had orchestrated this humiliation together. But I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. My fists clenched momentarily, my jaw tightening as Brandon stepped forward, his smirk widening. Step aside, buddy. This is my wedding now. His words dripped with mockery, and I knew he was expecting a reaction. Maybe he thought I'd lunge at him, throw a punch, scream at Celeste, something dramatic to make their little show even more entertaining. I could feel my blood boiling beneath my skin. My mind raced with 1,000 things I could say, 1,000 ways I could expose them, ruin them. But that would mean I had lost control. And that, I refused to do. I forced my shoulders to relax, unclenched my fists, and took a slow, deliberate breath. Then I smiled. It wasn't a strained smile, nor was it forced. It was calm, collected, and most importantly, unexpected. The reaction was immediate. Celeste's triumphant expression flickered, just for a second, as if she suddenly wasn't so sure of herself. Brandon's smirk twitched, his confidence wavering just slightly. Even Celeste's parents, who had been laughing, went silent. That was when I knew I had just taken back control. By all means, I said smoothly, stepping back and gesturing toward the altar. The stage is yours. I turned and walked toward an empty seat in the front row. My shoes echoed against the marble floor as I moved. The room still deadly silent except for the occasional murmur of disbelief from the guests. I sat down, crossing one leg over the other, folding my arms as I leaned back into the chair. And then, I watched, like I was simply an audience member at a play. Celeste and Brandon stood frozen for a moment, the weight of my reaction sinking in. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They had planned this meticulously, calculated my humiliation down to the last detail, expecting an explosion, a scene. But instead of a man broken and humiliated, I had become something else, something they hadn't anticipated. An observer. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Some guests were clearly uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, while others seemed utterly fascinated by what had just unfolded. Is this real? Someone whispered. Is he actually just sitting there? Another muttered. Celeste's father cleared his throat, breaking the silence. His voice, though still tinged with amusement, carried an underlying uncertainty now. Well, he said, forcing a chuckle. This certainly is a surprise. But what's important is that our daughter has followed her heart, and we support her decision. Laughter followed his words, but this time it wasn't as full of conviction as before. Celeste shot me a sideways glance, her fingers tightening around Brandon's hand. She was waiting for me to react, to flinch, to break. But I didn't. I just stared at her, that same cool, unwavering smile on my face. She swallowed. And just like that, the power shifted. Brandon, clearly irritated by my lack of reaction, stepped forward. His voice, meant to be smug, carried a hint of uncertainty. "Look, man, I know this sucks for you," he said, clearly trying to sound magnanimous, "but you'll get over it. I mean, let's be real. Celeste and I were meant to be together. You were just in the way." I didn't blink, didn't flinch. I let his words hang in the air, studying them. Celeste shifted uncomfortably. Her dress, the one I had paid for, suddenly seemed too tight, too heavy. Her cheeks were flushed, not with happiness, but with something else. Doubt. Brandon tried to laugh, but it was weaker this time. "Hey, come on. No hard feelings, right?" I tilted my head slightly, my smile widening just a fraction. "Hard feelings?" I said, my voice even. "Oh no, Brandon. No hard feelings at all." His brows furrowed slightly, as if trying to read between the lines of my words. He shifted, suddenly less comfortable in the spotlight than he had been moments ago. The whispers in the crowd intensified. Celeste's mother forced another laugh. "Oh, darling, let's just get on with the ceremony. This is a happy occasion." Happy? I glanced at the audience. Some were staring at me, their eyes filled with something that almost resembled admiration. Others were still stuck in shock. And then there were those who looked at Celeste and Brandon with disgust. That was what they hadn't accounted for. They had expected a spectacle, yes, but they had also expected the crowd to be on their side. They had wanted my breakdown to solidify their victory. Instead, my reaction had turned them into the joke. Celeste fidgeted. She was nervous now. Brandon's confidence was cracking. And I was in control. I leaned back in my seat, my voice carrying across the silent room. "Well, don't stop on my account," I said, motioning to the priest. "Go ahead. I'd love to see how this turns out." Brandon shot Celeste a look. Celeste looked at the priest, who was now shifting awkwardly, clearly not sure how to proceed. The atmosphere was wrong. The moment had soured. The grand betrayal they had planned wasn't turning out to be the triumphant moment they had envisioned. Instead, it was awkward, tense, a failure. Celeste's parents exchanged glances. The laughter had completely died down now. I let the silence stretch. Let them feel the weight of what they had done. Let them wither under it. I was no longer the fool. They were, and they were just starting to realize it. As I sat there in that grand cathedral, watching the uncomfortable silence stretch, I found my mind drifting back, retracing every step, every moment, every warning sign I had ignored. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It wasn't unexpected, not if I was honest with myself. The truth was, the signs had been there all along. Small, almost insignificant moments that, in hindsight, were glaring red flags. But I had been too blinded by love, too desperate to believe that what I had with Celeste was real, that she was different. I met her 2 years ago, and from the very beginning, she had this effortless way of making me feel like I was the most important person in the world. She was stunning, the kind of woman that made heads turn when she walked into a room. But it wasn't just her beauty. It was the way she spoke to me, the way she made me feel chosen. Special. Like I had won a prize no one else could claim. I had always been a logical, level-headed man. I prided myself on being observant, careful. And yet, with Celeste, I had ignored my instincts. There had been moments. So many moments. The way she was too secretive with her phone. I had never been the type to pry. I respected privacy, and in return, I had expected trust. But Celeste had always been just a little too guarded with her messages, a little too quick to turn her screen away whenever I was nearby. "It's just work," she would say with an airy laugh whenever I asked. "You wouldn't be interested in my boring conversations." I had nodded, dismissing the slight unease in my gut. The way she had started pulling away. 6 months before the wedding, I had noticed it. The subtle distance. The way her kisses had started feeling more like routine than passion. The way she had begun to cancel dates. Always with some vague excuse. "I'm just stressed, babe. The wedding planning is a lot." And I had believed her. I had wanted to believe her. Because what else was I supposed to do? Call her a liar? Accuse her of something without proof? And then there was Brandon, my so-called best friend. The guy I had grown up with. The man who had stood beside me through everything. School, first jobs, breakups. He had always been the life of the party, the one with the easy charm, the effortless confidence. And yet, in the months leading up to the wedding, he had started appearing more and more in our lives. I remembered the way he had joked about the wedding, over and over again, in ways that should have made me pause. "Man, are you sure you're ready for this? Marriage is a whole different ballgame. You know, if you ever change your mind, just let me know. I'd take your place in a heartbeat. I had laughed, brushed it off as his usual humor. But then, there was the way Celeste had laughed along with him. Like it was an inside joke. Like there was something I wasn't in on. I had seen it. I had felt it. I just hadn't wanted to face it. Even my friends had tried to warn me. There's something off about her. One had told me after a night out. She looks at Brandon like, I don't know, man. Just be careful. I think he likes her. Another had said more bluntly. And I think she likes the attention. I had shrugged it off, convinced myself that they were just jealous, that they didn't understand. But they had seen the truth before I had. And now, sitting in this wedding hall, watching Celeste and Brandon squirm under the weight of my composed silence, I realized I had known all along. I had just refused to see it. The night before the wedding, the final confirmation had been placed right in my hands. Celeste had left her phone at my apartment. It wasn't intentional. She had been in a rush, her mind preoccupied. When I noticed it sitting on the kitchen counter, I had picked it up, intending to bring it to her. And then, the screen lit up. A message from Brandon. Tomorrow's the big day. Are you ready? Celeste's response came in immediately. Of course. It's going to be perfect. He has no idea. My heart had pounded. My mind had screamed at me to stop, to put the phone down, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I had ignored that, just as I had ignored everything else. I had scrolled, and what I had found had nearly brought me to my knees. Message after message. Plans made behind my back. We'll finally be free. His money is just the beginning. We'll live the life we deserve. You're the one I should be walking down that aisle to, not him. Celeste's words. Celeste's betrayal. And Brandon had replied just as cruelly. I told you, he's too easy to manipulate. This is going to be legendary. That was when the rage had come. Not just at them, but at myself. For not seeing it sooner. For allowing this to happen. For loving someone who had never loved me back. I had wanted to confront her then and there. I had wanted to storm to her apartment, throw the phone in her face, demand an explanation. But instead, I had waited. I had calculated. Because the only thing more powerful than an explosion of anger was patience. I had let her believe that everything was fine. I had walked into my wedding day fully aware of what was coming. And now, as I sat there watching them squirm, I realized that I had already won. They thought they had taken everything from me. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't ruined. I was awake. I had spent 2 years blinded by love. But now, I saw everything clearly. Celeste shifted uncomfortably under my gaze, her fingers gripping Brandon's hand just a little too tightly. She looked at me, and for the first time since this entire mess had started, she looked worried. Because she realized the same thing I did. I wasn't defeated. I was just getting started. The night before the wedding should have been a time of joy, of excitement, of nervous anticipation for the life I was about to begin. Instead, it became the moment that shattered the illusion I had built for myself over the past 2 years. It started simply enough. Celeste had been in a rush all day, making last-minute preparations. She had called me that afternoon, her voice unusually sweet, telling me how excited she was to finally be my wife. She told me she loved me, that tomorrow was going to be the best day of our lives. And I had believed her. Like a fool, I had believed her. I had spent the evening alone, sipping on a glass of whiskey, reflecting on how lucky I was. I had convinced myself that all the little doubts, the tiny warning signs I had ignored, were just pre-wedding jitters. That once we were officially married, everything would fall into place. Then, around midnight, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. It was a message from Celeste. Celeste, sorry babe. I left my phone at your place. Can you bring it tomorrow morning? I totally forgot it there earlier. I frowned, glancing at the counter where her phone sat. I hadn't even noticed it before. It was face down, the screen dark. I picked it up. That was when it happened. A notification popped up. A message preview glowing on the screen. Brandon, tomorrow's the big day. Are you ready? For a moment, my mind tried to rationalize it. It was innocent, right? Brandon was my best man. Maybe he was just checking in on her. Then another message appeared. Brandon, this is going to be perfect. He has no idea. A strange coldness washed over me, numbing my limbs. I shouldn't have looked. I should have put the phone down, walked away, and confronted her the next day. But I didn't. Because deep down, some part of me already knew. I swiped the screen, entered her passcode, one I had seen her type 100 times before, and opened her messages. And what I found changed everything. Dozens of messages. Some recent. Some months old. Celeste, I can't believe we're actually doing this. Brandon, he's too clueless to even suspect a thing. Celeste, I'll play my part tomorrow. I'll pretend to be the heartbroken bride. And then, finally, we'll be free. Brandon. And Rich. Don't forget Rich. I stared at the words, my stomach twisting into something ugly. Rich. That's what this had been about all along. Not love. Not fate. Not two souls meant to be together. It had been about money. My money. I gritted my teeth, scrolling further. The messages went back for months. This wasn't a last-minute betrayal. It wasn't a decision Celeste had made in a moment of weakness. It had been planned. From the very beginning, she had been playing me, manipulating me. And Brandon, the man I had trusted for years, the one I had grown up with, shared my secrets with, he had been waiting, lurking in the shadows, stealing from me before I even knew I had lost anything. I swallowed, gripping the phone tighter as I kept reading. Celeste, once we're married, his money will be ours. He'll never see it coming. Brandon, I still can't believe he actually thinks you love him. Celeste, he's so naive. He still treats me like some kind of prize. Brandon, good. Let him think that. Makes it easier. A sharp exhale left my lips. I should have felt anger. I should have thrown the phone against the wall, stormed out of my apartment, and confronted them right then and there. But instead, I felt something else. Clarity. It was like someone had pulled a veil from my eyes. The love I thought I had, the perfect future I had envisioned, it was a lie. And now that I knew the truth, I wasn't going to let them win. I put the phone down, my heartbeat steadying. They expected me to be a fool, to wake up tomorrow with no idea, to stand at that altar like an idiot while Celeste delivered her carefully rehearsed performance of heartbreak and regret. And then Brandon would step in, smug, triumphant, stealing what was supposed to be my moment. They thought I'd break. They thought they'd humiliate me. But they had underestimated me. I wasn't going to just walk away from this. No, I was going to make them regret it. I spent the rest of the night awake, planning. I wasn't going to lash out. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. Instead, I was going to make them pay. By the time the sun rose, I was ready. I got dressed, put on my suit, looked in the mirror. I didn't see the heartbroken man they thought I'd be. I saw something else. Someone new. Someone who wasn't going to be a victim. Someone who was about to turn their perfect plan into a nightmare. I pocketed Celeste's phone, grabbed my car keys, and walked out the door. Because today wasn't just a wedding. It was the day I took everything back. The morning of the wedding, I woke up with an unusual sense of calm. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from joy or anticipation. It was the silence before a storm, the stillness before an earthquake. I had spent the night replaying every message, every lie, every moment Celeste and Brandon had spent plotting against me. By the time the sun rose, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to be their fool. I wasn't going to be their victim. I was going to make them regret everything. I showered, dressed in the expensive suit I had custom-tailored for this day, and looked at myself in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't the same one from yesterday. Yesterday, I had been a groom. Today, I was something else. I had one last thing to do before heading to the venue. I took out my phone and made a call. Everything's set. I asked. It's all ready, came the reply. I smirked. Good. I'll see you there. Then, I grabbed Celeste's phone, the same one she had left behind, the same one that had shattered my illusion of love, and slid it into my pocket. It was going to be my weapon today. The wedding venue was a masterpiece. The grand floral arrangements, the pristine white chairs arranged in neat rows, the golden arch that stood over the altar, it all screamed luxury. And I had paid for every single thing. I walked in, head high, shoulders squared, scanning the room. Guests were arriving, chatting in small groups, sipping champagne, oblivious to what was about to unfold. I spotted Celeste's parents standing near the front, looking smug, as if today was just another day of them winning at life. I took a deep breath, keeping my expression unreadable. Not yet. I made my way toward the dressing rooms. I found Brandon there, adjusting his tie in the mirror, his face filled with the kind of arrogance that made my stomach turn. You're really going through with this? I asked, my voice calm. He turned, startled, then chuckled. Oh man, I was wondering when you'd show up. Look, I get it, this sucks for you. But hey, things happen for a reason, right? I nodded slowly. Yeah, they do. He smirked. You'll move on. You'll find someone else. No hard feelings, huh? I stared at him, at his casual indifference, at the way he truly believed he had won. Then I smiled. No hard feelings at all. I left him there, clueless, still fixing his tie, still thinking today was going to end with him as the victor. Then came the ceremony. I stood at the altar, waiting. The guests had taken their seats. The music swelled. And then, there she was, Celeste, walking down the aisle in the gown I had paid for, glowing like a bride ready to start her new life. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't hesitant. She was proud of what she was about to do. I kept my face neutral, not a flicker of emotion. Then the priest spoke. Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? And just like that, it happened. I can't do this, Celeste said, stepping back, her voice clear, unwavering. Gasps rippled through the audience. I heard whispers, the confused murmurs of guests trying to process what was happening. Then she turned to me. My new husband will take your place now. Why don't you join the audience? She smirked. And from the crowd, Brandon stepped forward, adjusting his sleeves like he had just won a championship. The humiliation should have hit me like a truck. The betrayal should have gutted me. But all I felt was satisfaction, because I had been waiting for this moment. The guests were stunned, their expressions ranging from horror to amusement. Some looked genuinely outraged. Others, they looked entertained. Celeste's parents laughed, and that was my cue. I smiled. By all means, I said, stepping aside. The stage is yours. The smirk on Celeste's face twitched. Brandon's arrogant expression flickered with uncertainty. They had expected anger, devastation, a scene. Instead, I calmly walked to an empty chair in the front row and sat down. And then I pulled out my phone. Celeste's phone. I connected it to the projector behind the altar. And then, the first message appeared on the giant screen. Celeste, I'll play my part tomorrow. I'll pretend to be heartbroken. And then, finally, we'll be free. A collective gasp filled the room. Brandon stiffened. Celeste froze. I leaned back in my seat, watching as message after message flashed across the screen. Brandon, he's too clueless to even suspect a thing. Celeste, he still treats me like some kind of prize. The guests started murmuring louder. Celeste's mother covered her mouth in shock. Her father's face darkened with rage. Celeste turned to me, panic in her eyes. Turn it off, she hissed. I tilted my head. Why? This is your love story, isn't it? Shouldn't everyone hear it? More messages. More betrayal. Then, the final dagger. A message Celeste hadn't seen yet. A message between Brandon and another woman. His real fiancée. Brandon had been playing Celeste, too. The color drained from Celeste's face. She slowly turned to him. Brandon, she whispered. Brandon stammered. This isn't what it looks like. But it was exactly what it looked like. Celeste's world collapsed in real time. Her father's furious voice echoed through the venue. You humiliated us. Brandon tried to back away, but guests blocked the exits. Celeste's bridesmaids stepped away from her, their faces twisted in disgust. The guests, who had come expecting a perfect wedding, had instead witnessed the most brutal public exposure imaginable. By the time I stood up and walked toward the exit, Celeste and Brandon were ruined. I stopped at the door, turned back one last time, and said, Enjoy the wedding, lovebirds. Then I walked away, and I never looked back. The moment the first message appeared on the giant screen behind the altar, the entire wedding hall fell into a stunned silence. The joyful, elegant atmosphere of the venue had evaporated in an instant, replaced by something thick, suffocating panic. Celeste, dressed in the extravagant gown I paid for, stood frozen in the spotlight. Brandon, standing beside her, went rigid, his eyes darting between the screen and the stunned guests. And me? I sat there in the front row, watching them unravel. The words illuminated the entire venue. Celeste, I can't believe we're actually doing this. Brandon, he's too clueless to even suspect a thing. Celeste, I'll play my part tomorrow. I'll pretend to be the heartbroken bride. And then, finally, we'll be free. Brandon, and Rich. Don't forget Rich. Gasps filled the hall. Murmurs turned into outright whispers. The guests weren't just shocked, they were horrified. Celeste sucked in a breath, her perfect, practiced expression slipping into something wild-eyed and desperate. Turn it off, she shrieked. She turned to me, eyes blazing, her voice shaking with rage and fear. Turn it off. I tilted my head, my expression calm, unbothered. Why? I asked. This is your love story, isn't it? Shouldn't everyone hear it? More messages flashed on the screen. More undeniable proof of her betrayal. Celeste, once we're married, his money will be ours. He'll never see it coming. Brandon, I still can't believe he actually thinks you love him. Celeste, he's so naive. He still treats me like some kind of prize. Brandon, good. Let him think that. Makes it easier. A sharp gasp cut through the whispers. Celeste's mother, who had been laughing only minutes ago, now covered her mouth in shock. Her father's face darkened with rage. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some whispering in disgust. Is this real? Someone murmured. She planned this, another gasped. For his money? I could feel the weight of 100 eyes on her, on Brandon, the two people who had thought they had won. Celeste spun back to face me, her voice trembling. You did this, she whispered, her eyes wild. I smiled. No, Celeste. You did this. I'm just showing everyone who you really are. Her hands trembled. Her breath hitched. For the first time since this entire nightmare began, she wasn't in control. Brandon, who had been standing beside her, suddenly realized the shift. The plan had failed. Their perfect, orchestrated humiliation of me had backfired spectacularly. This isn't what it looks like, he stammered, his voice breaking. The messages kept coming. And then, the final betrayal. A message neither of them had seen yet. A message between Brandon and another woman. A woman who was not Celeste. Her name appeared on the screen. Someone Brandon had been seeing behind Celeste's back. His real fiancée. Celeste stiffened. Her breathing quickened. She slowly turned to him, the color draining from her face. Brandon, she whispered, the confusion, the shock seeping into her voice. Brandon stammered, his face drained of its arrogance. This isn't what it looks like, he started. Celeste's body trembled, her hands balled into fists. You were using me, she whispered. Brandon's jaw clenched. He was caught. Everything was falling apart. The audience was no longer whispering. They were talking outright, shaking their heads in disgust. Celeste's father stood up from his seat, his face contorted in fury. You humiliated us, he hissed. You humiliated this family. Celeste turned back to me, her perfect wedding day dream crumbling before her eyes. Please, she said, stepping toward me. We can fix this. We can talk. I shook my head. Talk. I let out a low chuckle. You should have done that before planning to ruin me. Before you chose him over me. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't interested in hearing another word. Brandon, meanwhile, was trying to escape. He took a step back, but the guests, the very people who had been his audience, his supporters, were blocking the exits. His expression turned panicked. Sweaty. Hey, come on, guys, he laughed nervously, raising his hands. Let's all calm down. A champagne glass shattered nearby as someone threw it down in disgust. The guests weren't on his side anymore. Celeste wasn't on his side anymore. He was alone. Celeste's mother, who had laughed before, now looked like she was about to faint. Brandon's smug arrogance had turned to pure panic. He had lost everything. I stood up, adjusting my cuffs. I glanced at Celeste one last time, taking in her shaking frame, her glossy eyes filled with regret. Enjoy the wedding, lovebirds, I said. I hope it was everything you dreamed of. Then I turned and walked out. And I never looked back. The weight of my words still hung in the air as I turned my back on Celeste and Brandon. I didn't rush. I didn't run. I walked, slowly, deliberately, through the stunned silence of the wedding hall, the murmurs and gasps of the guests trailing after me like whispers of a storm I had unleashed. Behind me, chaos erupted. You betrayed him? Someone whispered, their voice laced with disbelief. For money, another guest muttered. Celeste's face had gone completely pale, her fingers trembling as she reached out toward me, as if she could pull me back into the nightmare she had crafted. Wait, please, she choked out. I didn't turn around. Brandon, on the other hand, was reeling. His arrogance had crumbled, his confidence shattered into a million tiny pieces. He had spent the last several months smugly believing he had outplayed me, that he was the mastermind behind my downfall. Now, he stood before an entire wedding hall, exposed. The same people he had expected to laugh at my pain were now whispering about him. The man who had walked in so boldly, standing beside my bride, smirking as if he had already won, now looked like a cornered animal. And Celeste? She was breaking. Her entire world had just crumbled in a matter of minutes. The expensive wedding dress she had been so eager to flaunt. The one I had paid for suddenly felt like a heavy weight dragging her down. Her hands trembled as she turned toward her parents, searching for support. But instead of comfort, she found disgust. Her mother, once laughing, now covered her face, her eyes darting around the crowd, as if embarrassed to even be associated with her daughter. Her father? His face was red with barely contained rage. "You humiliated us," he hissed, his voice sharp as a blade. Celeste flinched as if he had struck her. "Dad," she started, but he shook his head. "You threw away everything," he spat. "For this." His gaze snapped to Brandon, who was visibly sweating now. "You lied to us," Celeste's father continued, his voice dangerously low. "You made a fool out of me, out of this family." Brandon stammered, trying to form a response, but the guests were no longer waiting for an explanation. They had already judged him. I took a slow breath as I neared the exit, pausing for just a second to glance over my shoulder. Celeste had tears in her eyes now, but not from love, not from any kind of real loss. She was crying because she had lost control, because her perfect plan had backfired. Brandon was looking around desperately, realizing there was no escape. And that was when the first champagne glass shattered. A woman in the front row, one of Celeste's bridesmaids, had thrown it to the ground in disgust. "You used him," she said, her voice shaking with fury. She turned toward Celeste, her eyes flashing. "I stood up there with you, supported you, thought you had found real love." She shook her head, her lip curling. "But you were just a gold-digging snake." Celeste whimpered. The rest of the guests weren't any kinder. "You planned this?" someone else asked. "She's worse than I thought," another voice added. Brandon was sweating now, his jaw tightening as the judgment turned toward him. Then came the real humiliation. One by one, people started leaving. Aunts, uncles, family friends, people who had come to witness a joyous occasion, were now shaking their heads in disgust. Some walked out without a word. Others made sure Celeste and Brandon heard them. "I can't believe I took time off work for this," one guest scoffed. "I hope she knows she's ruined her reputation," another whispered. And then came the worst part. Celeste's boss stood up. She was a well-respected businesswoman, someone Celeste had spent years trying to impress. She sighed, shaking her head. "I can't employ someone this deceitful," she muttered. "Consider yourself unemployed, Celeste." The gasp that left Celeste's lips was almost pitiful. Almost. She spun around, gripping her dress, looking at the remaining guests wild-eyed, as if desperate to salvage what little she had left. "Please," she cried, her voice cracking. "You have to understand this. This isn't how it was supposed to go." But nobody was listening anymore. Nobody cared. Celeste, the woman who had spent months plotting my downfall, was now drowning in her own disaster. Brandon? He was already moving toward the exit, trying to slink away like the coward he was. "Where do you think you're going?" one of the groomsmen asked, stepping in front of him. Brandon stopped in his tracks, his shoulders tense. His smirk was gone. His arrogance? Destroyed. This was his wedding now, wasn't it? But there was no ceremony. No vows. No future. Only ruin. I turned back toward the doors, letting the chaos consume them. The last thing I heard before stepping outside was Celeste's broken sobs. She had chosen this. She had played her game. And she had lost. Miserably. I took a deep breath, stepping into the cool evening air. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was free. I had walked into that church a groom. I had left it a man reborn. The moment I stepped out of that disaster of a wedding, I knew I had won. The trap had been set, the humiliation had been delivered, and Celeste and Brandon were left drowning in the wreckage of their own deceit. But I wasn't done yet. Not entirely. Because there was one final revelation left to deliver. And this time, it wasn't just for Celeste. Brandon had his own secrets, ones he thought were well hidden, locked away behind his smug arrogance. But the thing about liars? They always slip up eventually. And he had slipped up with me. As I walked away from the venue, the chaos still unfolding behind me, I pulled out my phone and sent one final message. "Me, you can come in now." I didn't need to wait long. A sleek black car pulled up near the venue, and from it emerged her, Madeline, Brandon's real fiancée, the woman he had been stringing along just like he had done to me. She had no idea what was about to hit her. Dressed in a tailored navy dress, she carried herself with the kind of confidence Celeste had always envied. She wasn't the type to be easily fooled, but Brandon had worked his charm on her just like he had on so many others. When she saw me, her brows furrowed. "What is this about?" she asked, crossing her arms. I exhaled, gesturing toward the venue. "You're about to see exactly who you're engaged to." Madeline scoffed, shaking her head. "I don't have time for." And then she heard it. Celeste's voice, shrill and desperate, cutting through the night air. "You lied to me." Brandon's response was panicked, the sound of a man who had finally realized he had no escape. Celeste, listen, it's not what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. Madeline's expression flickered with uncertainty. I took my phone out of my pocket, tapped a few buttons, and handed it to her. "Read it," I said. She hesitated, but when her eyes landed on the screen, her face paled. The messages between Brandon and Celeste. The ones where they plotted against me. The ones where they talked about taking my money, leaving me in ruins. The ones where Brandon laughed behind my back. And then, the newest messages. The ones Brandon had sent to another woman. Not Celeste. Someone else. Madeline inhaled sharply, her grip tightening on the phone. "That bastard," she whispered, her voice shaking. Brandon hadn't just betrayed me. He had been playing multiple women at once. Celeste had thought she was the one in control. She had thought she was winning, that she had secured a future with a man who would take my place and give her the life she wanted. But in reality, she had been used just like me. Madeline turned toward the venue, her eyes burning with fury. "Where is he?" she demanded. I smirked. "Inside. You might want to hurry. He's trying to run." Madeline didn't waste another second. She stormed into the venue, her heels clicking against the pavement like gunshots. I followed behind her, just in time to witness the final explosion. Brandon was at the far end of the room, pushing through guests, trying to escape. Celeste was on his heels, screaming at him, her wedding dress looking more like a cage than a gown now. "You lied to me," she shrieked. "You said you loved me." Brandon whipped around, his face twisted with frustration. "You were using me too, Celeste. Don't act like you're innocent in all this." But before he could take another step, Madeline appeared. And the moment his eyes landed on her, he froze. His face went white. "And Madeline," he stammered. She didn't hesitate. She slapped him so hard across the face that the sound echoed through the entire venue. A collective gasp rippled through the remaining guests. Brandon stumbled back, his cheek already turning red. "How many?" Madeline hissed, stepping toward him. Brandon's lips parted, but no words came out. "How many women, Brandon?" she demanded, her voice low, deadly. Celeste's expression twisted as she turned back to him, realization hitting her like a freight train. "You mean there were more?" she breathed. Brandon swallowed hard. He had lost. Completely. "You lying, cheating piece of garbage," Madeline seethed. "I was supposed to be your fiancé. We were planning a wedding. And yet here you are, standing at another man's wedding, humiliating yourself for another woman you don't even love." Celeste staggered back, looking between them, her face twisting in horror. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You used me too?" Brandon tried to run, but there was nowhere left to go. The guests, who had once laughed at my supposed humiliation, now blocked his path. Celeste collapsed into a chair, gripping her head. Madeline took a slow step toward him. "We're done," she spat. "And I hope you end up alone for the rest of your pathetic life." Then she turned on her heel and walked out, leaving nothing behind but devastation. Brandon stood there, stunned, destroyed, exposed. Celeste sat there, realizing she had lost everything. And me? I simply turned to the crowd, gave them a small nod, and walked out. Free, victorious, and ready to start my life without them. I stepped outside, inhaling the cool evening air, letting the weight of everything settle in. The wedding hall behind me had turned into a war zone. Celeste, once so smug, was now crumbling, her world burning down around her. Brandon, the man who had walked in believing he had won, was ruined, his lies exposed, his betrayal turned against him. But this wasn't over yet. Not for them. Because actions have consequences. And Celeste and Brandon were about to experience the full weight of the fallout. As I stood by my car, I pulled out my phone. The messages I had exposed inside the venue had been only the beginning. There was more. A lot more. With a few taps, I sent a message to a group chat I had created days ago. A group filled with Celeste's coworkers, mutual friends, and people in our social circle. I attached the full screenshots of Celeste and Brandon's plans. And then I pressed send. The effect was instantaneous. My phone lit up with notifications. Messages exploding one after another. Sarah, holy crap. Is this real? She actually planned this? Mark, dude. She's done. There's no coming back from this. Lisa, I knew she was shady, but this? A slow, satisfied smirk spread across my lips. This wasn't just a betrayal between a few people. This was a scandal. A scandal that was about to follow them everywhere. Back inside, the humiliation was still unraveling. Celeste's father was livid. His hands were clenched into fists, his face red with barely contained rage. Do you have any idea what you've done? He hissed at her. Celeste shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Dad, please, I can fix this. Fix this, he barked. You humiliated this family in front of everyone. And for what? A man who was using you. Her mother, once so supportive, now looked like she was about to faint. This is a disaster, she muttered. Celeste sobbed, her shoulders shaking. No, this wasn't how it was supposed to go. Her father let out a cold laugh. And what, exactly, was it supposed to be, Celeste? You expected us to applaud you for betraying a man who gave you everything. Celeste's lips quivered. Save it, he snapped. You're on your own now. Celeste froze. Her head whipped up, eyes wide. Dad, what are you saying? Her father's face was unforgiving. I'm saying you're not my daughter anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. Her mother gasped. Celeste's bridesmaids took a step away from her, as if ashamed to be associated with her. Her world was collapsing. And then came the final blow. Celeste's boss, the woman she had spent years trying to impress, trying to climb higher in her career, stood up. I can't have someone like you representing my company, she said, shaking her head. Celeste's breath hitched. What? No. Please, you can't fire me. I didn't mean for this to happen. Your actions have consequences. Her boss cut her off. And this is a PR nightmare. Consider yourself unemployed. The sob that left Celeste's lips was raw. Brandon, meanwhile, was desperately trying to escape. He pushed past guests, eyes darting around like a trapped animal, trying to find a way out. But the guests blocked the exits. No one was letting him walk out of this clean. Then, just when he thought things couldn't get worse, his phone rang. He pulled it out, hesitated, and then answered. Hello. There was a long pause. And then, his face crumpled. No. Wait, I can explain. But whoever was on the other end didn't care. His business partners. The men who had invested money into his company. And now, they were pulling out. No. This is just a misunderstanding, he stammered, but his voice was rising in panic. Another pause. And then, a look of sheer horror crossed his face. No, please, don't do this. I need more time. But it was already done. Brandon had lost everything. Celeste's sobbing filled the room. Brandon's panic was palpable. The guests watched in disgust. And me? I simply walked away. Not broken, not defeated, but free. The fallout didn't stop there. Within a week, Celeste's name was all over social media. Screenshots of her messages. Clips of the wedding disaster. People talking about how she had destroyed herself. She had lost her job. Her friends distanced themselves. No one wanted to be associated with her anymore. She had played a dangerous game, and she had lost spectacularly. Brandon, on the other hand, left the city. He had no choice. His reputation was ruined. His business collapsed. His financial security gone. They had thought they were stealing my life. Instead, they had destroyed their own. One evening, as I was sitting in my new apartment, one I had bought after completely cutting ties with my old life, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was. Celeste. She looked nothing like the confident, manipulative woman who had stood at that altar. Her once perfect hair was a mess. Her designer dress was gone, replaced by cheap, worn-out clothes. Her eyes were hollow, filled with a regret that came far too late. Please, she whispered. I made a mistake. I held up a hand, cutting her off. No, Celeste, I said, my voice calm. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. Her lip trembled. But and now, I continued, stepping back, you live with it. And then, without another word, I closed the door in her face. Forever. Weeks had passed since the wedding, or rather, the disaster that had been meant to be my wedding. Life had taken a completely different turn, one I hadn't anticipated, but one I had come to embrace. Celeste and Brandon were gone. Not physically. No, they were still in the city, but in every other way that mattered, they had ceased to exist. Their reputations? Destroyed. Their futures? Wrecked. The fallout of their betrayal had been more brutal than I could have ever planned for. And yet, I had orchestrated it perfectly. But the best part? I was thriving. Celeste had shown up at my door begging for forgiveness, her once proud face now hollow with regret. And I had done the one thing she never expected. I closed the door in her face. She had made her choice. Now she had to live with it. My best revenge wasn't just watching her life fall apart. It was watching mine get better. I had taken time off work after the scandal, not because I was broken, but because I needed to reset. For too long, my life had revolved around people who didn't deserve me. People who had only seen me as a means to an end. Now, I was living for me. I upgraded my apartment, moved into a high-rise with a view of the city skyline. The place was sleek, modern, completely free of old memories. Every morning, I woke up in a place that was mine alone. No ghosts of betrayal. No reminders of what had been. I went back to the gym, something I had neglected while planning a future with a woman who had been planning to betray me. The anger I had once felt turned into fuel. Every rep, every run, every weight I lifted, it wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. And as for work, my career took off. While Celeste was out there jobless, struggling to pick up the pieces of her life, I was getting promoted. Turns out, being publicly humiliated at your own wedding does wonders for your reputation, if you handle it the right way. Clients admired how I had kept my composure. People in the industry saw me as someone who had grace under pressure. I started getting offers, better positions, more money, more opportunities. The life Celeste and Brandon had thought they were stealing from me, I was living it at a level they could never reach. One evening, I was out at a high-end bar with some colleagues when I spotted her. Celeste. She was sitting at a table in the corner, hunched over, her once pristine hair now dull, her makeup smudged from exhaustion. She wasn't wearing designer clothes anymore, just an average, off-the-rack dress. She looked defeated. And then I noticed something else. She wasn't alone. She was arguing with Brandon. Or rather, what was left of him. Brandon, the man who had once smirked at my pain, who had confidently walked up to the altar and taken my place, now sat across from Celeste looking just as wrecked. His once expensive suit was cheap now, wrinkled. His confident swagger? Gone. He gestured wildly, frustration etched into his face. I smirked, sipping my drink, watching as their fairy tale relationship crumbled in real time. Celeste's voice rose. I lost everything because of you. Brandon leaned in, voice low and bitter. You think I didn't lose, too? You think this is what I wanted? Celeste laughed harshly. You told me we were in this together, that we'd have everything. Brandon scoffed. Well, guess what? We have nothing. And it's your fault just as much as mine. I let out a low chuckle. Beautiful. They were turning on each other. It was inevitable. Two selfish people will always self-destruct when they can no longer leech off others. I could have walked over, could have rubbed salt in their wounds, could have reminded them that I had won. But I didn't need to. My silence was more powerful than anything I could say. I finished my drink, tipped the bartender, and walked past them without a second glance. Celeste looked up. Our eyes met for a brief second. And in that moment, she knew. She knew exactly what she had lost. She opened her mouth, maybe to say something, maybe to beg, but I didn't stop. I walked out of that bar and into the night, feeling lighter than I had in years. Because my best revenge wasn't their downfall. It wasn't their suffering. It was the fact that I didn't care anymore. They were nothing to me now, just faded memories of a life I had outgrown. And as I stepped into the street, the city lights glowing around me, I smiled. Because I wasn't just moving on. I was thriving. And that was the best revenge of all.